Hello, Campbell Chapel. Today we begin a short teaching entitled Planning Season. Our community spends far too much time in worship to be as sick as we are, as poor as we are, and to have our families as divided as they are. It is my personal mission to change that reality. One way we change that reality is through prior planning. For the next few minutes, we're going to explore the AME Annual Conference calendar. Then we'll look at several aspects of planning season, and then finally we'll discuss the role of the executive committee in the local ministry. At Campbell Chapel, we're members of the 7th Episcopal District of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. That means that the state of South Carolina makes up one entire Episcopal district. We divide the state into 6 sections. Those sections are called annual conferences. You have before you the schedule for the 6th annual conferences in South Carolina. Now, we happen to be members of the South Carolina Annual Conference. In 2018, we celebrated our annual conference from September 26th through September 29th. At the close of the annual conference on September 29th, Campbell Chapel's planning season began. One crucial event that takes place during planning season is called the Bishop's Planning Meeting or the Post Conference. In South Carolina, this meeting is usually held at the Florence Civic Center in Florence, South Carolina. It's usually held in early November. At the planning meeting, the bishop gives us his vision for the upcoming year. At that same planning meeting, he also makes his final appointments for pastors and presiding elders. One last event he will do is provide us with his calendar. All of this is important as we move forward to do our planning on the local ministry level. The purpose of planning season is to prepare us for the upcoming conference year. Now, we're focusing this training on the local ministry level. On the local ministry level, they must hold elections, develop an annual calendar, develop an annual budget, and compile an annual roster. We're going to review all those aspects in this training. There are other things that won't be in this training, but are very important. During planning season, it's a good idea to stop and reflect on what happened last conference year. What were the great success stories? What were the areas you wish you could have done better? We grow from both of those evaluations. And then we can dream about what's possible this upcoming conference year. What can we do that we've never done before? Or how can we move this ministry forward in miraculous and marvelous ways? All that can take place during planning season. In the African Methodist Episcopal Church, most officers serve a 1-year term. There's some exceptions to that. Bishops serve 4-year terms. And during the quadrennium, a missionary president may serve 2 years before an election is held. But overall, most of us have a 1-year term. We may serve multiple consecutive terms, but we're assigned 1 year at a time. There are some groups that are limited to 8 consecutive years. That's an exception to the rule. But for most, you may serve as many consecutive years as you are appointed, confirmed, or elected. What does a slate look like? Well, that depends on how many elected officers are needed for the local ministry to get the job done. For many local ministries, they may need only 3 or 4 elected officers. Others may need a long list of elected officers. The first task of the outgoing executive committee is to determine how many officers they will need for the upcoming conference year. Once that number is determined, start your slate by listing those elected positions. That's part one. Part two, you need candidates who are willing to run for those elected positions. The sample we have before us shows that this executive committee was able to find at least one candidate for every elected position. When the pastor comes to conduct this election, the first thing the pastor will ask is, are there nominations from the floor? If there are nominations from the floor, they will be added to the slate. The pastor will begin with the office of president and proceed down the hierarchy as the local ministry has determined. For those who are running unopposed, they will probably be elected by a voice vote. For those who are running with opposition, either a secret ballot or show of hands will be used to elect them. Once everyone is elected, the pastor will then swear in or install the new officers. Early in planning season, the newly elected officers will engage the task of developing the local ministry's calendar. All local ministries must complete this task by the official board meeting in December. The pastor, along with the calendar committee, will work out any conflicts in the calendars. Before the local ministry can develop its calendar, it must be aware of what's happening on the bishop's level. In general, our bishop hosts several meetings every year. There's usually a bishop post conference or planning meeting in early November, Founders Day at Allen University in mid-February, the Holy Convocation or Mid-Year Convocation, which is usually in March, the Christian Education and Leadership Congress, which can be in August or even July. In addition, there will be a long list of connectional organization meetings and activities. We must make sure that we don't conflict with the bishop's calendar. Next, we need to look at the presiding elder's calendar. The presiding elder usually holds his planning meeting in early December. We can count on him having a district conference in February or March, a Christian Education and Church School Conference in June, and a back-to-school bash in August. In addition, there will be numerous meetings of the WMS, YPD, DMC, Sons of Allen, lay organizations, and others in the calendar from the elder. We must make sure that we don't conflict with any of the events on the elder's calendar. When it comes to developing the local ministry calendar, the first question the executive committee must ask themselves is, what is our mission? Once that question is answered, they know what should go at the top of their calendar. Another way to ask that question is, why do we exist? Or what must we do to fulfill our calling? In the example before you, this local ministry has decided that they need to do 4 ministry projects. In my mind of minds, I envision them going into the community and doing great things each quarter. Once they've determined what to do, they pull out their calendars and they find an appropriate date for each of those quarterly activities. And then they list the dates. In the example before you, the second thing this local ministry determined was that they needed a time to celebrate and recruit. So on the 4th Sunday of March, they're going to take charge of the service and call it their annual day. They pick that date and put it on their calendar. Finally, they realize that they need to have a regular time of meeting and fellowship. And in the example before you, they're going to meet every month on the 3rd Saturday at 9 a.m. They pulled out their calendar, found out which dates that corresponds to, and they listed those dates. Once they have all those dates, they will put them in chronological order and submit them to the official board. They will submit them by the official board meeting in December. Once all those dates arrive to the official board from the various local ministries and activities, they will be compiled into the Campbell Chapel annual calendar. Where there are conflicts, those will be resolved by conversations with the different ministries, the pastor, and the calendar committee. Here's an example of a completed calendar. It includes the 12 monthly meetings, the 4 ministry projects, and the 1 annual day. Once this calendar is approved, it will be submitted to the property manager. However, it is always a good idea for the executive committee to discuss their ministry needs with the property manager. Once you have completed your annual calendar, you're in a good position to start your annual budget. There are 2 sections to a budget. The first section are the expenses, and the second section is the income or revenue. Always start with the expenses. Since your calendar reflects the activities you need to fulfill your mission, the first line items on your budget should be those things that are on your calendar. What do you need to do to fulfill your mission? If you look through this slide, you may see some other suggestions. You may want to include educational materials, ministry benevolence. That's the money you give to your members when they're sick or shut in or going through bereavement. They may be secretarial and administrative expenses. Or you may want to include some money in your budget to buy an ad for the church anniversary or give a donation to the pastor's appreciation. Once you have determined all of the expenses you need for that year, you should list them and total them up. Here's an example of a completed estimated total expense section of a budget. In this example, the ministry has included everything that's found in their annual calendar. They've also included a few other line items that are necessary for them to fulfill their ministry mission. In a few minutes, we'll discuss balancing the budget. It might be necessary for them to come back to this estimated total expense section to review all the line items to see if they can cut out some fat. If we look at this budget, there are a couple of good targets. Perhaps, if necessary, they can reduce the amount of money they spend for refreshments at their monthly meetings. Or maybe they can find a way of funding the administrative costs through donations. Once you've determined how much money you need to fulfill your mission, it's time to determine how you're going to raise that money. There are many different ways. Some ministries will have dues, others will have fundraisers, some may solicit grants, and there are always donations from the local community. We're fortunate here at Campbell Chapel. We're in the heart of a tourist community. There are many outside fundraising opportunities. There's a farmer's market, there are monthly festivals. We're in the heart of the Gullah Geechee corridor. Be creative, be prayerful, and I'm certain you will find the funds necessary to fulfill your mission. Here's an example of the completed income section of a budget. In this example, they estimate that they will be able to raise $2,300 throughout this conference year. Now it's time to balance the budget. We call that doing the math. The first thing you need to do is list your total estimated revenue. From that number, subtract your total estimated expenses. Look at your balance. If your balance is 0, or if it's a positive number, PTL, you're done. Now, as a little footnote, if you do have a positive number, you need to determine where you're going to distribute that extra income. But let's say your number was negative. There's some more work you need to do. You may start by cutting out any fat that is in your total estimated expenses. Once you've taken the fat out, you may look at increasing your income or revenue producing activities. And then finally, you may appeal to the Commission on Stewardship and Finances. You're appealing to the congregation. They will assist ministries by funding certain vital ministry activities. Vital ministry activities that you in the local ministry are not able to fund. At any event, you need to end up with a zero balance budget. Now you're ready to compile an annual roster. This may seem like an unimportant step, but it's vital to the success of your ministry. You can't assume that everyone that falls in a certain category belongs to your ministry. All the men of the church are not members of the Sons of Allen. All of the women of the church are not members of the Women's Missionary Society. I would suggest that you get some method of enrolling members into your ministry so that there's some line of accountability between the ministry and the individual. Once you have enrolled them, you need to keep a roster. At the very least, you need their name, address, telephone number or numbers, and email address. You may also want to include other information: date of birth, marital status, names of their children, educational level, perhaps even their gifts and callings, whatever is important for your ministry to function. It's important that your members know they belong to you and that ministry belongs to them. Here's an example of a sample roster. In this case, only one name appears on the roster. As you notice, this is very sensitive information. It should be kept in a secure place. There should be limited access to this information. It should only be shared with others with permission. There are literally libraries full of books that discuss the role of the executive committee. Unfortunately, we don't have time to really do this subject matter justice. Today, I want to focus our attention around some vital areas for those who are members of Campbell Chapel. First, the most important role of your executive committee is to provide care and support to all the members of your ministry. When they are sick, someone should visit them. When they're bereaved, someone should comfort them. When they're going through life at its harshest, someone should listen to them and pray with them. That's the most important role of the executive committee. And as we say every Sunday morning in the summary of the Decalogue, and the second is like unto it, the executive committee should facilitate the spiritual growth and development of all its members. We should help our members to know how to pray and read their Bibles, how to serve God with a glad heart. Encourage them to attend worship, church school, Bible study, prayer services, and other meetings. Encourage them to be the best Christian they could possibly be. Now, there are a few administrative things we need to focus on here at Campbell Chapel. We need to ensure that every month a written report is submitted from every ministry. Every month a written report is submitted from every ministry. Second, we need to ensure that the financial report given at the quarterly conference is signed by a member of that ministry, and that someone from the executive committee is present at the quarterly conference. And then finally, we want to make sure that you're supporting your ministry on the district, conference, and even connectional level. If we do these things, we're going to have a great year. God bless you, Campbell Chapel.